The bouquet cracked like glass on burgundy carpet. 4 months of stitches, $800 lace, my 70-year-old hands, mocked by the groom's relieved smile. I had $190,000 hidden and a mic on my brooch, 100 witnesses. He promised legal papers. He whispered, collateral. Then the door opened. The bouquet hit the chapel floor with a sound like breaking glass. White roses scattered across the burgundy carpet, while my granddaughter Clara stood frozen at the altar, her hands shaking so violently that the silk stems had simply slipped from her fingers. The wedding dress I had spent 4 months hand-sewing, French lace and pearl buttons that cost me $800, suddenly felt heavy as lead on my 70-year-old shoulders. Every stitch I had lovingly placed seemed to mock me now, because something in Clara's tear-filled eyes told me this wasn't tears of joy. This was terror. Daniel, the groom, bent to pick up the bouquet with that practiced smile that never quite reached his eyes. Nervous bride. He chuckled to the 100 guests packed into St. Mary's Chapel in Denver. But I caught something else in his voice. Relief. As if Clara's obvious distress was exactly what he'd been hoping for. What they didn't know, what nobody in that flower-decorated sanctuary could imagine, is that I had $190,000 hidden in 3 savings accounts. Money I'd earned stitch by stitch over 45 years of making other women's dreams come true. Money that was about to become the weapon that would destroy the man who dared to hurt my granddaughter. My name is Laura Peterson. I'm 70 years old, a widow, and a retired wedding dress seamstress. And this is the story of how I turned what should have been the happiest day of Clara's life into Daniel Morrison's worst nightmare. I'm so glad you're here listening to my story. You know, when I decided to tell this, I wasn't sure anyone would believe that a quiet old seamstress could bring down a con man. But if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, if you've ever felt helpless watching someone you love get hurt, then you'll understand why I had to act. If this story resonates with you, please hit that like button. And while I tell you exactly how this unfolded, if you could subscribe to the channel, it would mean the world to me. I want to know where these stories are reaching. Comment below and tell me where you're listening from. Now let me take you back to the moment everything changed, just 3 hours before that bouquet hit the floor. I was in Clara's bridal suite at the chapel, steaming the final wrinkles from her veil, when my phone buzzed with a WhatsApp notification. Clara was in the bathroom, and I glanced at my screen absently, expecting maybe a congratulations message from my sister in Chicago. Instead, I saw an audio message from Daniel, sent to me by mistake. My finger hovered over the play button. Something told me not to listen. Something told me that whatever was on that recording would change everything. But I pressed play anyway. Daniel's voice filled the room, muffled but clear. After the ceremony, the money is ours, Rico. The old lady's got close to 200 grand saved up, plus she promised Clara 50,000 as a wedding gift. We use the girl as collateral until she pays up. Then we're clear with Vegas. The phone slipped from my hands and clattered on the marble floor. For 45 years, I had sewn wedding dresses. I had touched silk and satin and watched brides' faces light up when they saw themselves transformed. I thought I understood love. I thought I could recognize the real thing when I saw it. But what I had just heard wasn't love. It was a business transaction. My granddaughter, the girl I had raised like my own daughter after her mother moved to Seattle, was being sold like livestock to pay gambling debts. Clara emerged from the bathroom, radiant in the dress I had designed specifically for her petite frame. "Grammy, you look pale. Are you okay?" I forced a smile, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Just emotional, sweetheart. You look beautiful." But inside, I was calculating. The ceremony was in 2 hours. The reception was scheduled for immediately after. All those guests, all those witnesses, Daniel's family, his friends, people from his work, a perfect audience for what I was already planning. Because if Daniel Morrison thought he could con a seamstress who had survived 70 years in this world, who had built a small Fortune 1 dress at a time, who had learned to see through people's facades by watching them in mirrors during fittings, then he was about to learn exactly how wrong he was. I excused myself and walked to my car, fingers trembling as I dialed a number I hadn't called in months. "Borges? It's Laura Peterson. I need your help, and I need it fast." Detective Sergeant Robert Borges, retired, lived 2 streets from my house. We'd been neighbors for 8 years, ever since he moved to Denver after leaving the Chicago PD. He was the only person I trusted with what I was about to do. Laura? What's wrong? You sound... Can you meet me at the chapel parking lot in 10 minutes? And Borges, bring your recording equipment. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in Borges's pickup truck, explaining everything, while he adjusted a tiny wireless microphone to the underside of my brooch. Laura, this is dangerous, he said, his weathered face creased with concern. If this guy is mixed up with gambling debts in Vegas, we're not talking about petty theft. We're talking about people who break legs. Then we better make sure he goes to prison before he can hurt Clara, I replied, pinning the brooch back to my navy blue mother-of-the-bride dress. Borges connected the receiver to his phone and tested the signal. Crystal clear. Okay, but the moment you feel unsafe, you give me the signal. I'll have backup ready. I nodded, but I already knew I wouldn't need backup. I'd been reading people through mirrors for 45 years. Daniel Morrison was about to discover that this 70-year-old seamstress had some tricks he never saw coming. Back in the chapel, I took my seat in the front pew. Clara looked gorgeous at the altar, but I could see the tremor in her hands, the way she kept glancing toward the exit. My heart broke watching her, but I forced myself to stay calm. The ceremony proceeded with all the traditional pomp. Vows were exchanged, rings were blessed, and when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the congregation erupted in applause. But I was watching Daniel's face, and when he thought no one was looking, when everyone was clapping and cheering, I saw him glance toward the back of the church and nod at someone. A man in a cheap suit nodded back. Rico, I assumed. During the recessional, as the happy couple walked down the aisle, Daniel's phone buzzed. He checked it discreetly, then leaned over to whisper in Clara's ear. Her face went white. Grammy, Clara called to me as they reached the exit. Daniel says we need to go sign some papers at the hotel before the reception. Legal stuff. Legal stuff. At 4 o'clock on their wedding day. Of course, dear, I said sweetly. I'll meet you at the reception venue in an hour. But I had no intention of waiting an hour. As soon as the newlyweds drove away, I was in my car, following at a distance, with Borges trailing even further behind. They didn't go to any hotel. They went to a strip mall office building on the outskirts of Denver, to a storefront with Morrison Financial Consulting painted on the window. I parked across the street and waited, the recording device in my purse capturing every word that would come through Borges's receiver. 15 minutes later, I heard Clara's voice, shaky and confused. I don't understand, Daniel. Why do I need to sign loan papers on our wedding day? It's just a formality, baby. The bank requires both our signatures since we're married now. It's about your grandmother's money. My grandmother's money? Clara, your grandmother has been hiding money from you your whole life. Almost $200,000. She was planning to cut you out of her will, but now that we're married, we can force her to pay what she owes you. I gripped the steering wheel so hard, my knuckles went white. The lies rolled off his tongue like honey. I don't want Grammy's money, Clara said, and I could hear her crying. She's been good to me. She raised me when Mom couldn't. She's been manipulating you. Daniel's voice turned sharp. Wake up, Clara. She's a selfish old woman who's been hoarding money while you struggled through college, while you worked 2 jobs just to pay rent. She could have helped you, but she chose not to. That's not true. Sign the papers, Clara. If you don't, I'll have to explain to Rico why his money isn't coming, and trust me, you don't want to meet Rico when he's disappointed. There it was, the threat, clear as church bells on Sunday morning. I looked across the street and saw Rico's silhouette in the office window. 6 feet tall, broad shoulders, the kind of man who solved problems with his fists. Clara was trapped in there with 2 predators, and the only thing standing between her and disaster was a 70-year-old seamstress with a hidden microphone and 45 years of accumulated rage. I got out of my car and walked across the street. Through the window, I could see Clara hunched over a desk, pen shaking in her hand, while Daniel stood behind her like a prison guard. When I pushed open the door, the little bell above it chimed cheerfully. All 3 of them turned to stare at me. Hello, Daniel, I said, my voice steady as steel. I think we need to talk. Daniel's face went through 3 distinct emotions in the span of 2 seconds. First, surprise, then panic. Finally, that practiced smile slid back into place like a mask he'd worn 1,000 times before. Mrs. Peterson, What a wonderful surprise! Clara and I were just handling some boring paperwork. You know how it is with newlyweds. So much legal stuff to sort out. Rico stepped forward from the corner where he'd been lurking, and I got my first good look at him. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, with the kind of face that had seen too much violence too early. His hands were scarred across the knuckles, and when he smiled, I could see a gold tooth that caught the fluorescent light. "This the grandmother?" Rico asked, looking me up and down like I was livestock at auction. Clara's head snapped up from the papers. Her mascara had run, leaving dark streaks down her cheeks, and her carefully styled wedding hair was coming undone. "Grammy? What are you doing here?" "I came to bring you something, sweetheart," I said, pulling out my phone. "Something I think you need to hear." Daniel's practiced smile faltered. "Mrs. Peterson, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding." "Oh, there's been a misunderstanding, all right." I pressed play on the audio message. Daniel's own voice filled the room. "After the ceremony, the money is ours, Rico. The old lady's got close to 200 grand saved up, plus she promised Clara 50,000 as a wedding gift. We use the girl as collateral until she pays up, then we're clear with Vegas." The silence that followed was deafening. Clara's face went white as her wedding dress, and for a moment I thought she might faint. Rico's hand moved toward his jacket, and I saw Daniel's jaw clench as he realized exactly how thoroughly he'd been caught. "You recorded me?" Daniel's voice was no longer smooth. It was raw, dangerous. "You sent it to me yourself, honey," I replied calmly. "Accidentally, I assume. Though I have to say, for someone who thinks he's so clever, that was pretty sloppy." Clara stood up so fast her chair toppled backward. "Collateral? You were going to use me as collateral? Baby, let me explain." "Explain what?" Clara's voice cracked. "Explain how you married me to steal my grandmother's money? Explain how you were planning to hand me over to this—" She gestured at Rico. "This criminal when Grammy wouldn't pay?" Rico stepped closer, his gold tooth glinting. "Old lady, you just made a very big mistake. Do you have any idea who you're messing with?" I looked up at him, all 6 feet and 200 pounds of him, and felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. For 45 years, I had dealt with bridezillas, demanding mothers, and impossible deadlines. I had built a business with nothing but a sewing machine and determination. I had survived the death of my husband, raised a granddaughter, and accumulated nearly $200,000 one dress at a time. This thug in a cheap suit thought he could intimidate me? "Actually," I said, "I think the question is, do you have any idea who you're messing with?" I pulled out my phone again and dialed a number. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Borges here." "It's Laura. I'm inside the office. You can come in now." 30 seconds later, the door chimed again. Detective Sergeant Robert Borges filled the doorway, his retired cop instincts evident in the way he immediately assessed the room, cataloged the exits, and positioned himself between me and Rico. "Afternoon, folks," Borges said pleasantly. "Beautiful day for a wedding. Though I have to say, this seems like an unusual place for newlyweds to be spending their reception time." Daniel's composure cracked completely. "This is harassment. You can't just barge in here with some rent-a-cop." "Actually," Borges interrupted, pulling out his badge, "I'm retired Chicago PD, 28 years on the force, specialized in financial crimes. And Mrs. Peterson here asked me to look into your background, Daniel. Very interesting reading." He pulled out a manila folder and flipped it open. "Daniel Morrison, age 32. 3 arrests for check fraud in Illinois. Banned from 6 casinos in Nevada for suspected card counting. Currently owes $85,000 to Vincent the Shark Castellanos organization in Las Vegas." Rico's hand was definitely in his jacket now, but Borges continued as if he hadn't noticed. "And Mr. Rico Valdez here," Borges nodded toward the corner, "currently wanted for questioning in connection with a home invasion in Boulder last month. Interesting group you've assembled, Daniel." Clara was staring at her new husband like she'd never seen him before. $85,000? "Daniel, you told me you were a financial consultant." "I am a financial consultant," Daniel snapped. "I help people manage their money." "By stealing it?" I asked. "It's not stealing if she owes it to me." Daniel's mask was completely gone now, replaced by something ugly and desperate. "Clara, your grandmother has been hoarding money for years while you struggled. She watched you work 2 jobs, watched you eat ramen noodles for dinner, and never lifted a finger to help. Don't you think she owes you something? She doesn't owe me anything, Clara shouted. She raised me, she fed me, clothed me, loved me when nobody else would. She's manipulated you into thinking that— Shut up! Clara ripped off her wedding ring and threw it at Daniel's chest. Just shut up! I can't believe I married you! I can't believe I almost— She broke down, sobbing. I moved to put my arm around her, but Rico stepped into my path. Nobody's leaving until we settle this debt, he said quietly. The old lady pays the 85 grand, or things get unpleasant for the whole family. That's when I heard the sound that made my heart sing. Police sirens, getting closer. Borges, I said sweetly. Did you happen to mention to anyone where we were going? Borges checked his watch. Oh, that would be Detective Martinez and his team. I called them about 20 minutes ago, right after I heard the recording of Danny Boy here discussing his plans to use a young woman as collateral for gambling debts. Funny thing about that, it's called human trafficking in Colorado. Federal offense. Daniel went green around the gills. Rico's hand came out of his jacket, but instead of a weapon, he pulled out car keys. This is bullshit, Rico muttered, heading for the back exit. I ain't going down for your amateur hour operation, Morrison. But when he pushed open the rear door, 2 uniformed officers were waiting for him. Mr. Valdez, Denver PD, you're under arrest. The next 10 minutes were a beautiful chaos of Miranda rights, handcuffs, and Daniel Morrison's spectacular meltdown. He alternated between trying to blame Clara, she knew about the money, blame me, the old bitch set me up, and blame Rico, he forced me into this. Clara watched it all with a mixture of horror and relief. When they finally led Daniel away in handcuffs, she turned to me with tears streaming down her face. Grammy, I'm so sorry. I almost— Shh, I said, pulling her close. You don't have anything to apologize for. He fooled a lot of people. Borges appeared at my elbow, grinning. Laura, that was some of the finest police work I've seen from a civilian. Ever consider a career change? I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. I think I'll stick to sewing, thanks. Though I have to admit, this was more exciting than hemming wedding dresses. As we walked out of that strip mall office building, Clara still in her wedding dress and me in my mother of the bride outfit, I realized something important. The money I'd saved, the $190,000 that Daniel had wanted so desperately, had never been about accumulating wealth. It had been about security, about making sure I could protect the people I loved when they needed it most. And today, it had done exactly that. But I had a feeling this wasn't over. Daniel Morrison might be heading to jail, but men like him always had backup plans. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I wondered what other secrets might be hiding in Clara's new life. After all, con artists rarely work alone. 3 days after Daniel's arrest, I thought the nightmare was over. Clara was staying at my house, slowly recovering from the shock of discovering her marriage was an elaborate con. She'd been quiet, spending most of her time in the sewing room where I used to work, running her fingers over the silk and lace remnants like they could somehow stitch her broken heart back together. I was making us both some chamomile tea when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Peterson? This is Attorney Janet Williams. I represent Daniel Morrison. My blood turned to ice water. What do you want? I think we need to discuss a mutually beneficial arrangement. My client is willing to drop all charges against you for illegal recording and harassment if you're willing to be reasonable about this whole misunderstanding. Charges against me? I laughed, but it sounded hollow even to my own ears. Lady, your client is the one in jail for attempted human trafficking. Actually, Mrs. Peterson, the charges have been reduced to fraud, and my client posted bail this morning. He's a free man. The teacup slipped from my hand and shattered on the kitchen floor. That's impossible. Borges said. Detective Borges is retired, Mrs. Peterson. He has no official standing in this case. And the recording you made? It won't be admissible in court due to Colorado's 2-party consent laws. You recorded my client without his knowledge or permission. I felt the world tilting sideways. So he's just free? Free and very motivated to resolve this situation quickly. I suggest you meet with us tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. at my office. We can discuss how to make this whole unfortunate situation disappear. the line went dead. I stared at the phone, my 70-year-old hands shaking like autumn leaves. Clara appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Grammy, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." Before I could answer, there was a sharp knock at my front door. Through the peephole, I saw a woman in an expensive suit holding an official-looking envelope. "Laura Peterson, you've been served." The papers were a civil lawsuit. Daniel Morrison versus Laura Peterson, seeking damages for defamation, harassment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The amount he was suing for, $190,000. Every penny I had saved. Clara read over my shoulder, her face going pale. "He's trying to take your life savings?" "That was always the plan," I said quietly. "He just found a legal way to do it." That's when I called Borges. 20 minutes later, he was sitting at my kitchen table, reading through the lawsuit with a grim expression. "Laura, this is bad. Really bad. Williams is a shark. She specializes in flipping victim and perpetrator in cases like this. She'll argue that you entrapped Daniel, that you violated his privacy, that you're a vindictive old woman who manipulated the situation. But the audio won't be admissible, and even if it was, Williams will claim it was taken out of context." Borges rubbed his temples. "There's something else. I did some more digging into Daniel's background. This isn't his first rodeo." He pulled out another folder, this one thicker than the first. "Daniel Morrison has done this exact same scam 4 times in the past 6 years. Different states, different identities, but the same MO. He targets young women from families with money, marries them quickly, then uses legal pressure to extract cash settlements from the relatives." Clara sank into a chair. "How many other women?" "4 that I can prove. Probably more. The first was in Kansas. Married a farmer's daughter, sued the family for $50,000, settled out of court. Then Oklahoma, Texas, Nevada. Each time, he moves on before anyone can connect the dots." I felt something cold and hard forming in my chest. So he's done this before. Successfully. Very successfully. And here's the worst part. In Nevada, the girl's family refused to pay. 2 weeks later, she was found beaten half to death in a parking garage. No proof Daniel was involved, but the message was clear, I finished. Borges nodded grimly. "Laura, I think you need to consider paying the settlement. This isn't about money anymore. It's about keeping you and Clara safe." "No." The word came out sharper than I intended. "I'm not giving that monster 1 penny of my money, and I'm sure as hell not letting him walk away to do this to someone else's granddaughter." "Then what do you suggest?" I looked at Clara, sitting there in her pajamas, her wedding dress hanging in the closet upstairs like a ghost. I thought about the 4 other young women who had been through this nightmare. I thought about how many more there might be if someone didn't stop him. "We're going to need help," I said finally. "Real help." The next morning, I called my attorney, Gerald Morrison. No relation to Daniel, thankfully. Gerald had handled my husband's estate and had been managing my legal affairs for 15 years. "Laura, this is a complex situation," he said after reviewing the lawsuit. "Williams is claiming that Daniel and Clara had a legitimate marriage and that you interfered with their marital relationship through deception and coercion. Gerald, the man was planning to sell my granddaughter to pay gambling debts. I believe you, but proving it in court is another matter entirely. The recording is problematic, and Daniel's attorney will argue that whatever debts he may have had don't prove criminal intent regarding Clara." I felt my heart sinking. "So, there's nothing we can do?" "I didn't say that." Gerald leaned forward. "But we need to be smart about this. If we're going to take down someone with Daniel's experience, we need ironclad evidence. And we need to do it fast." Williams filed a motion for expedited proceedings. "We have 48 hours before the preliminary hearing." That afternoon, Borges arrived with a friend, Detective Sarah Chen from Denver PD's Financial Crimes Unit. "Mrs. Peterson," Detective Chen said, "Detective Borges has filled me in on the situation. While I can't officially investigate a closed case, I can tell you that we've been interested in Daniel Morrison for some time." She opened her laptop and showed me a screen full of financial records. "We've been tracking a pattern of suspicious financial activity across multiple states. Wire transfers, quick marriage licenses, rapid civil settlements. Daniel Morrison keeps appearing in the data, but always under slightly different names and always moving before we can build a case. Different names? David Morrison in Kansas, Daniel Morimoto in Oklahoma, Dan Morgan in Texas. Same person, same scam. Just enough variation to avoid detection. Borges leaned forward. Sarah, what would you need to build a federal case? Evidence of interstate fraud, proof that he's using false identities, and most importantly, a victim willing to go on record. I'll go on record, Clara said immediately. Clara, honey, I started. You don't understand what that means. Yes, I do. Her voice was stronger than I'd heard it since the wedding. It means other women won't have to go through what I went through. It means he can't keep hurting people. Detective Chen nodded approvingly. That's brave, Clara, but we need more than just your testimony. We need documentation. That's when I remembered something. The office, I said suddenly. The strip mall office where we confronted him. Morrison Financial Consulting. Borges, you said he had papers there? Contracts? The place was cleaned out by the time we got a warrant, Borges said. But what? But I might know someone who could help us get inside. An hour later, we were sitting across from Miguel Santos, a private investigator who specialized in what he called information recovery. The office has been abandoned since the arrest, Miguel explained. Landlords looking for new tenants. If someone happened to be interested in renting the space and wanted to take a look around, that's probably illegal, Gerald warned. Probably, Miguel agreed cheerfully. But if someone found documents that had been left behind by the previous tenant, well, that's just good luck, isn't it? I looked around the table at these people who were willing to help me. A retired cop, an active detective, a private investigator, and a lawyer who was probably regretting taking my call. Do it, I said. Miguel grinned. I was hoping you'd say that. That evening, while Miguel was touring the abandoned office space, the rest of us worked on building our timeline. Detective Chen had managed to contact the victims from the other states, and slowly, a picture emerged that made my blood boil. Jessica Martinez in Kansas, 19 years old, had been convinced to forge her father's signature on a loan document. When the family refused to honor the debt, Jessica disappeared for 3 days. She was found tied up in a motel room, traumatized but alive. Amanda Foster in Oklahoma, 22, had been married to David Morrison for exactly 6 days before he filed for divorce and demanded half her family's farm as community property. When they fought the claim, Amanda's car was sabotaged. She survived the crash, but spent 2 months in the hospital. The stories went on, each more horrifying than the last. This man is a predator, Detective Chen said quietly, and he's escalating. Each case is more violent than the last. Clara had gone very quiet during these recitations. Finally, she spoke up. There's something I didn't tell you, she said. The night before the wedding, Daniel gave me some papers to sign. He said they were insurance forms, life insurance to protect our future together. Gerald and I exchanged glances. Do you still have copies? They're upstairs in my purse. When Clara returned with the documents, Gerald's face went white. Jesus Christ, he breathed. Laura, this isn't just insurance. It's $1 million life insurance policy on Clara, with Daniel as the sole beneficiary. The room went dead silent. And look at this clause, Gerald continued, his voice shaking. Death benefits are payable immediately in case of accident, suicide, or domestic violence. Detective Chen grabbed the papers. This is premeditation. This proves he was planning to kill her. I felt like I was going to be sick. He wasn't just going to use her as collateral. He was going to kill me, Clara finished, her voice barely a whisper. He was going to kill me and collect $1 million. That's when Miguel called. Ladies and gentlemen, his voice crackled through the speakerphone. You are not going to believe what I found in a filing cabinet that the previous tenant apparently forgot about. What? I asked. Contracts. Dozens of them. And not just for the other victims we know about. There are at least 12 more women across 8 states. This guy has been running this scam for over a decade. Borges whistled low. 12 more victims? 12 more that we know of. And here's the really interesting part. There's a whole network involved. Other men running the same scam in different regions. Names, addresses, phone numbers, bank account information. It's like a franchise operation. Detective Chen was already reaching for her phone. This is federal now. Interstate conspiracy, mail fraud, probably RICO violations. Miguel, I need you to photograph everything and get it to the FBI field office immediately. Already on it, Detective. Gerald looked at me with something approaching awe. Laura, do you realize what you've uncovered? This could bring down an entire criminal organization. But I wasn't thinking about criminal organizations. I was thinking about Clara, sitting there pale and shaking, realizing how close she'd come to being murdered for insurance money. What happens now? I asked. Now, Detective Chen said, we have 48 hours to put together the strongest case the FBI has ever seen. And Mrs. Peterson? Yes? That preliminary hearing Williams scheduled? It's about to become the most important day of Daniel Morrison's life. Because when we walk into that courtroom, we're not just going to defeat his lawsuit. What are we going to do? Detective Chen smiled. And it wasn't a nice smile. We're going to destroy him. The Denver County Courthouse felt like a cathedral of justice as I walked through its marble corridors at 9:45 a.m., 15 minutes before what was supposed to be Daniel Morrison's moment of triumph. The clicking of my sensible black heels echoed off the walls, each step a countdown to the reckoning I'd been planning for 48 straight hours. Clara walked beside me, her hand gripping mine so tightly I could feel her pulse through her palm. Behind us, Gerald carried 2 briefcases stuffed with evidence that would either save my life savings or destroy them completely. Courtroom 4B, Gerald murmured, checking his watch. Right on time. Through the frosted glass doors, I could see Daniel Morrison sitting at the plaintiff's table with his shark of an attorney, Janet Williams. He was wearing an expensive navy suit, probably bought with money stolen from one of his previous victims, and that same practiced smile that had fooled my granddaughter into thinking he loved her. What he didn't know was that behind the glass, 12 other women were waiting to meet him. Women whose lives he had destroyed across 6 different states. Women who had flown to Denver on their own dime just for the chance to watch him fall. Mrs. Peterson, Detective Chen appeared at my elbow. The FBI agents are in position. As soon as Williams makes her opening statement, we move. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. 45 years of building a life, 45 years of saving every penny, 45 years of work, all came down to the next 60 minutes. We pushed through the doors into courtroom 4B. Judge Patricia Hendricks was already seated, a stern woman in her 50s who looked like she'd seen every kind of con artist Denver had to offer. Daniel's head turned as we entered, and for just a moment, his practiced composure slipped. He hadn't expected Clara to show up. Your Honor, Williams began, standing with theatrical flair. This is a simple case of an elderly woman who used illegal surveillance and emotional manipulation to destroy my client's legitimate marriage. Laura Peterson, driven by jealousy and control, recorded private conversations without consent and orchestrated an elaborate scheme to have my client falsely arrested. She gestured toward me like I was something unpleasant she'd found on her shoe. My client seeks only what is fair: compensation for the emotional distress, damaged reputation, and lost income caused by Mrs. Peterson's vindictive actions. We ask for damages in the amount of $190,000, which coincidentally happens to be the exact amount of money Mrs. Peterson has been hoarding while her granddaughter struggled financially. Daniel nodded along, playing the wounded victim perfectly. Judge Hendricks looked over her glasses at me. Mrs. Peterson, you may respond. Gerald stood up, but I placed my hand on his arm. Your Honor, may I speak for myself? You may. I rose slowly, feeling every one of my 70 years in my bones. But my voice, when it came, was steady as bedrock. Your Honor, Mr. Morrison claims I destroyed his marriage to my granddaughter, but I didn't destroy anything. I discovered something. I pulled out my phone and placed it on the evidence table. I discovered that the man my granddaughter married was planning to use her as collateral for gambling debts. I discovered that he intended to force me to pay $85,000 to prevent harm from coming to Clara. And most importantly, Gerald handed me a manila folder. I discovered that Daniel Morrison has done this exact same thing to at least 15 other young women across 8 states over the past decade. Williams shot to her feet. Objection! Hearsay and irrelevant to the current proceedings. Actually, a new voice said from the back of the courtroom, it's extremely relevant. Everyone turned as FBI Special Agent Rebecca Torres walked down the center aisle, her badge clearly visible on her belt. Agent Torres, FBI Financial Crimes Division. Your Honor, we have evidence that Mr. Morrison is the head of an interstate fraud operation targeting young women and their families. Daniel's face went white as courthouse marble. Judge Hendricks leaned forward. Agent Torres, this is highly irregular. With respect, Your Honor, we've been tracking Mr. Morrison for 18 months. When Mrs. Peterson's case came to our attention 3 days ago, it provided the final pieces of evidence we needed. Williams was frantically shuffling papers. Your Honor, this is a civil proceeding. The FBI has no jurisdiction. Actually, they do, Gerald interrupted, standing with a smile that could have lit up the whole courtroom. Because 30 minutes ago, the U.S. Attorney's Office filed federal charges against Daniel Morrison for interstate wire fraud, conspiracy, and under the RICO Act. That's when the courtroom doors burst open. Jessica Martinez from Kansas walked in first, her head held high despite the nervous tremor in her hands. Behind her came Amanda Foster from Oklahoma, walking with a slight limp from the car accident Daniel had orchestrated. Then Maria Santos from Texas, Ashley Chen from Nevada, and 8 other women whose names I'd memorized over the past 2 days. 15 victims, representing a decade of destruction, all in the same room with the man who had tried to destroy their lives. Daniel Morrison looked like he was going to vomit. Your Honor, Agent Torres continued, these women are here to provide testimony about Mr. Morrison's pattern of fraud. But first, I'd like to present some additional evidence that came to light during our investigation. She nodded to Gerald, who opened his second briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. These are life insurance policies taken out by Daniel Morrison on each of his victims, with himself as the sole beneficiary. Total value, $14 million. The courtroom erupted in gasps and murmurs. $14 million in life insurance policies, Your Honor, including a $1 million policy on Clara Peterson taken out the day before their wedding. Clara made a sound like she'd been punched in the stomach. Gerald continued reading from the documents. Each policy contains specific clauses regarding death benefits in cases of domestic violence, accidents, or apparent suicide. In other words, Your Honor, Mr. Morrison wasn't just planning to defraud these families. He looked directly at Daniel, whose practiced smile had completely vanished. He was planning to murder these women and collect the insurance money. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Even Williams seemed stunned, speechless. Judge Hendricks' voice cut through the quiet like a blade. Mr. Morrison, do you have anything to say in response to these allegations? Daniel opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Sweat was beading on his forehead, and his hands were shaking. This is all circumstantial. They can't prove. I never actually hurt anyone. Actually, Jessica Martinez said, standing up from the gallery, you did hurt me. She rolled up her sleeve, revealing a scar that ran from her wrist to her elbow. 3 days in a motel room, tied up, no food, no water. You said you'd kill me if my family didn't pay. Amanda Foster stood next. You sabotaged my car. I spent 2 months in the hospital. One by one, the other women began to speak. Stories of manipulation, violence, threats, and trauma. A chorus of voices that had been silenced for too long, finally getting their chance to be heard. Daniel Morrison slumped in his chair like a deflated balloon. When the last woman finished speaking, Judge Hendricks turned to Williams. Counselor, does your client wish to withdraw his lawsuit? Williams looked at Daniel, who was now visibly sweating through his expensive suit. She looked at the 15 women staring at her client with expressions of pure justice. She looked at the FBI agents positioned at every exit. Yes, Your Honor, we withdraw the lawsuit. Furthermore, Agent Torres announced, Daniel Morrison, you are under arrest for interstate wire fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, and violation of the RICO Act. 2 federal agents appeared as if from nowhere, moving toward Daniel with handcuffs ready. That's when Daniel finally broke. Wait, he screamed, jumping to his feet. You don't understand. It wasn't supposed to go this far. I just needed the money. The casino people, they were going to kill me if I didn't pay. Williams was frantically making shut-up gestures, but Daniel was beyond caring. Clara, baby, please, I never meant to hurt you. I was going to fake your death, make it look like an accident. You wouldn't have felt anything, I promise. Clara stood up slowly from her seat beside me. For a moment, she just stared at the man she had married 4 days ago. Then she spoke, her voice carrying clearly across the silent courtroom. "You know what the saddest part is, Daniel?" He looked at her with desperate hope, as if she might somehow save him. "The saddest part is that if you had just loved me, really loved me, my grandmother would have given you anything. She would have helped you with your debts, helped you start over, helped you become the man you pretended to be." Her voice never wavered, never cracked. "But you couldn't love anyone, could you? Because you don't have a heart. You have a calculator where your heart should be." She turned away from him then, dismissing him as completely as if he had never existed. The federal agents cuffed Daniel Morrison in front of 15 women whose lives he had tried to destroy, in front of a courtroom full of witnesses, in front of his own attorney who was probably already planning to drop him as a client. As they led him away, he looked back at Clara one last time. "I'm sorry," he called out. "Clara, I'm really sorry." Clara didn't turn around. She was already walking toward the exit with her grandmother, ready to start building a life that didn't include predators disguised as princes. But I did turn around. I looked Daniel Morrison right in the eyes as the courthouse doors closed between us. "No," I said quietly, "but you will be." 6 months later, I was standing in the sunny kitchen of our new house in Cherry Creek, watching Clara arrange fresh daisies in a mason jar, when the phone rang with the news I'd been waiting for. "Laura, it's Agent Torres. I wanted to give you the final numbers." I set down my coffee cup and listened as she read from what sounded like an official report. Daniel Morrison was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for 15 years. The Rico conviction alone carried a 20-year minimum. Rico Valdez got 12 years as an accessory. And here's the really good news. We've dismantled the entire network. The entire network? 43 arrests across 12 states. The fraud ring was pulling in about $2 million a year. Thanks to the evidence you helped us gather, we've recovered over $800,000 for victims. I sank into a kitchen chair, suddenly feeling the weight of the past 6 months. 800,000? Laura, you saved lives. Not just Clara's, but dozens of other women who would have been targeted. The FBI is recommending you for a Civilian Service Award. After I hung up, Clara looked at me with those bright eyes that no longer held the shadow of fear that had haunted them after the wedding. "Good news?" she asked. "The best," I replied, watching sunlight stream through windows that belonged to us now, in this house we'd bought together with money that was truly ours. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. For weeks after the trial, Clara had barely spoken, spending hours in the sewing room I'd set up in our new house, running silk through her fingers like a prayer. She'd lost weight, jumped at unexpected sounds, and woke up most nights calling Daniel's name in terror. But slowly, day by day, she'd started to heal. And so had I. The woman looking back at me from the mirror these days was someone I barely recognized. Gone was the tight gray bun I'd worn for 40 years, replaced by shoulder-length silver hair that I wore loose around my face. Instead of the shapeless dark dresses I'd hidden in for so long, I now wore jewel-toned blouses and well-fitted jeans that made me feel younger than I had in decades. "Grammy," Clara said, interrupting my thoughts, "are you ready for the appointment?" I checked the clock. 2 p.m. Time for our weekly session at the Denver Center for Matrimonial Fraud Victims, the nonprofit organization we'd started with part of my savings and a generous grant from the Colorado Attorney General's office. 20 minutes later, we were sitting in a circle of folding chairs in the community center on East Colfax, listening to Sarah Martinez tell her story. Sarah was 23, recently escaped from a situation that sounded eerily familiar to Clara's experience. "He said he loved me," Sarah was saying, tears streaming down her face. "He said we were soulmates, but the whole time he was just calculating how much my family was worth." Clara reached over and took Sarah's hand. "I know exactly how that feels. The worst part isn't that he lied to you, it's that he made you doubt your own instincts." I watched my granddaughter, my brave, beautiful granddaughter, offer comfort to another young woman whose life had been shattered by a predator. 6 months ago, Clara could barely speak about her own experience. Now she was helping other survivors find their voices. "Sarah," I said gently, "the most important thing you need to know is that it wasn't your fault. These men are professionals. They study human nature the way doctors study medicine. You didn't fall for a lie. You fell for an expert performance. After the session, Clara and I drove to our favorite coffee shop in Capitol Hill. It had become our tradition. Every Tuesday after group therapy, we'd sit on the patio and plan the week ahead. I got another call from the documentary people, Clara said, stirring honey into her latte. They want to interview us for the Netflix series about matrimonial fraud. Do you want to do it? Clara was quiet for a moment, watching tourists stream down 16th Street with their cameras and guidebooks. You know what's funny? 6 months ago, I would have said no. I would have been too embarrassed, too ashamed. But now I think about all the women who might see it. All the young women who might recognize the warning signs because they heard our story. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Then we'll do it. That evening, as we sat on the front porch of our house, watching the sunset paint the Rocky Mountains gold and purple, I found myself thinking about the woman I used to be. The quiet seamstress who lived alone in a cramped house, afraid to spend her own money, afraid to take up space in the world. That woman felt like a stranger now. Grammy, Clara said, I've been thinking about going back to school. Really? What do you want to study? Criminal justice, maybe law. I want to help prosecute people like Daniel. I smiled, feeling a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with the Colorado sunshine. I think that's a wonderful idea. And you know what? I've been thinking about going back to school myself. You have? There's a program at the community college for teaching financial literacy to seniors. I figure after everything we've been through, I might have something valuable to share. Clara grinned. Look at us, a couple of dangerous women planning to change the world. Speaking of dangerous women, I said, pulling out a letter that had arrived that morning. Jessica Martinez is getting married next month. Real love this time. She wants me to make her wedding dress. Are you going to do it? I looked at the letter, written in Jessica's careful handwriting, thanking me for helping her learn to trust again. You know what? I think I am. But this time, I'm going to teach you how to sew it with me. A grandmother and granddaughter collaboration. Clara's eyes lit up. I'd love that. As the stars began to appear over Denver, I reflected on a lesson I'd learned at 70 years old. It's never too late to become the person you were meant to be. Sometimes it takes a crisis to reveal your own strength. Sometimes it takes watching someone you love almost get destroyed to discover that you're capable of fighting back. And sometimes, just sometimes, the predators pick the wrong family to mess with. I thought about Daniel Morrison, sitting in his federal prison cell, probably still calculating his next con. I thought about the 15 women whose lives he'd tried to destroy, now helping each other heal. I thought about all the future victims who would be safe because we'd found the courage to fight back. Grammy? Clara said sleepily, her head resting on my shoulder. Yes, sweetheart? Thank you for saving me. I kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her shampoo and the promise of tomorrow. Thank you for saving me right back.